In the heart of Texas in 1840, Booker Webster, taken by the Comanches years earlier, watched grief rise like a wall. Fluent in their language and familiar with their customs, he understood the reason. Chiefs and relatives had been killed by Texans during a peace meeting that turned into an ambush. The air grew heavy. Warriors, as a sign of loss, cut their own hair. Women, between sobs, slashed their arms and legs with knives, carving their sorrow into the skin. Yet the sadness began to shift slowly toward anger. Fires were lit, shadows danced inside the lodges, blades and stakes were sharpened. The murmur of weeping gave way to hurried steps and curt orders. Booker, who had learned to live among them, felt his body tense. He knew the kind of resolve that rises when honor is wounded. Around him, more than a dozen white captives were gathered under watchful eyes. Their stories were unlike his own. He had been adopted by a family that treated him as a son, protected by bonds that spared him the worst. But those women and children, taken in raids and forced exchanges, faced an uncertain fate, hanging between mercy and revenge. That night, Booker understood that war never comes from nothing. It rises from the weight of losses no words can undo, and its reach spares no innocent. Tension was already in the air when the news of the Texan betrayal spread through the camp. Among those people, war had always meant either existence or extinction, and the recent treachery only threw more fuel into the fire. That morning, however, the response didn't come from the warriors' spears. It came from the women who took it upon themselves to punish. It wasn't bravado. It was old pain, pushed to the surface by a blow that had wounded the whole community and demanded immediate retribution. These women kept daily life running. They were the ones who set up the tents, treated wounds, prepared food, taught the children, and kept things going when the men went off. They didn't sit at the top of the hierarchy, but nothing worked without their quick decisions and skillful hands. Practicality also guided their bodies. Short hair made work easier, avoided discomfort, and reduced the risk of pests in times when baths were rare. On their skin, color spoke. They preferred warm reds and yellows instead of the more subdued tones used by the men, marking what was ritual, mourning, or strength. By taking up retaliation, they weren't challenging the warriors. They were declaring that survival is everyone's duty, and that justice, when claimed by those who sustain life, carries a different kind of weight. They were short by 19th century standards, but the Comanches had mastered the art of fighting on horseback. The saddle was an extension of the body, the bow followed the rhythm of the gallop, and the fame of their raids spread across the plains. War mostly belonged to the men, but the women weren't on the sidelines. They rode with precision, handled bows firmly, and when the camp was under threat, they stood in line with the rest. Against European detachments pushing into their tents and herds, they fought without holding back. Texas Rangers or federal troops under the haze of the chase rarely knew who was who. They only saw determined warriors. Better to fall in battle than be captured, tradition taught. For captivity meant humiliation and pain worse than death. In the tribe's daily life, women were active participants. They encouraged raiding parties, prepared horses, kept track of routes and lookouts. On expeditions, they also took prisoners and brought them back. What awaited those captives varied. Some were killed, others were absorbed into the tribe, and survival didn't necessarily mean safety. Young boys were often treated more gently and could be taken in as family. Girls, especially those nearing adulthood, were seen as rivals, and because of that, they faced hostility, a sign of a world where power and belonging were decided with every gallop. Two lives reveal the darkest side of this clash of worlds. Matilda Lockhart was taken at 14 and returned a year later, scarred on her body and face. Rachel Plummer, captured in 1836, told of a captivity filled with abuse that ended with the death of her own baby. These accounts show the human cost of tense borderlands, where broken promises and fear shaped every decision. In 1840, a meeting between Comanche leaders and Texan authorities went terribly wrong. Angry over the failure to deliver promised prisoners, the Texans arrested a chief, and the room turned into a bloodbath. Dozens of Comanches were killed, and what was meant to be a council turned into a massacre. For the tribe, it wasn't just a defeat. It was a broken word, a wound to their honor. Mourning swept through the people. Many cut their sacred hair, a gesture that showed the depth of their loss. From then on, grief turned into a drive for revenge. The women, guardians of rituals and memories, expressed their despair through extreme acts, while the warriors sharpened their weapons and alliances. The cycle of raids and retaliation grew more intense, and the white captives, seen as both currency and message, suffered even more. Thus, from the pain of Matilda and Rachel to the chaos of the broken meeting, remains the memory of a time when failed negotiation fed the war, and war consumed lives. At first glance, the accounts of the Comanche War sound barbaric, but on the plains, those practices were part of their own code of combat. The mutilation of enemies wasn't just excess, it was meant to keep their souls from finding rest, condemning them to wander, following a ritual logic that tied action to belief about death and the afterlife. Among themselves, the Comanches called each other Numanu and held the idea that anyone outside the tribe occupied a lower place. That sense of hierarchy, in their eyes, justified the harshness shown in battle and also guided alliances, trades, and daily clashes with other peoples, shaping borders, choices, and destinies. In that way, religion, politics, and war were woven together. Honor and the defense of the group stood above compassion for the enemy, setting the rules and the punishments. On the southern plains, war shaped daily life, and Comanche women were not on the sidelines. They managed captives, decided punishments, negotiated ransoms, and when needed, took up arms. This sphere of action suggested a particular kind of balance between the sexes. Not full equality, but a division of power that allowed them to act and influence the tribe's fate. During expeditions and after battles, their voices carried weight in deciding which prisoners to keep and which young captives to bring into the group, helping preserve unity, alliances, and resources. Across the border, settlers feared being taken. The risk of crossing a trail and never coming back fueled panic, strengthened by accounts from survivors who returned scarred in both body and memory. These stories spread through camps and settlements, reminding everyone that the line between home and captivity was fragile and could break at any moment. Looking at the role of these women sheds light on the logic of that warrior society. They kept the village running, defended their kin, and managed violence with calculation and purpose. In doing so, they revealed the layers of a culture driven by honor, survival, and collective decision, one where power and care moved forward together. The response of indigenous women to what they saw as Texan betrayal didn't just change the course of the conflicts. It revealed a political force many preferred to ignore. Across different frontiers, they organized escapes, negotiated truces, planned ambushes, and kept support networks that held resistance together. By protecting villages and mediating disputes, they exercised real authority, taking care of daily life and charting paths when everything seemed to be falling apart. They were guardians of tradition, and at the same time, agents of change. To understand that role, it's important to remember there wasn't a single unified bloc. Each nation had its own rules, rituals, and strategies to face violence and broken promises. In that setting, the stories of Matilda Lockhart and Rachel Plummer reveal a time of clashes, kidnappings, retaliations, and tense negotiations. As harsh as these experiences are, they shed light on the contact zones where cultures collided, tried to understand each other, and often failed. If this topic caught your attention, stay with us. Like, share, and subscribe to follow new investigations that recover silent stories and connect past and present. Our goal is to offer context, challenge versions, and bring you closer to the choices real people made in extreme circumstances, so we can read the past without simplifications and recognize in it the roots of the present.